From the one room schoolhouse to the major educational institutions we see today, are we headed back to the one room schoolhouse? Is the educational system broken? Will the digital economy fix it? Well, let's unpack this on today's episode of The Steve Beeman Show. Welcome back, my friends, and I'm pleased to talk to you today about something that I think is of critical importance to all of us. The transition we've seen in education over the last 5 to 7 years is extraordinary, but we've really watched a transition over the last 50, 100 years. And I want to talk about it with you today. The genesis of this, by the way, is a speech I made recently in which a lot of the people that I was talking to about the digital economy and the transition to the digital economy talked about education and what the digital economy means for education. I've thought for a long time education is backward, it's broken, and this is not a criticism on teachers. Teachers are doing the very best job they can with the curriculum and resources they have available. The problem is the world is moving ahead much faster than the systems allow the teachers to move. So I want to take a look at that with you today in the hopes that we can begin a healthy dialogue on how we might improve education for the next generations coming up. I made the argument that the Gen Zs and millennials in many ways have been screwed. The educational system that we raised them in did not prepare them for this digital economy. Now, that's not necessarily the system's fault. The digital economy came on us very rapidly. But today, we know better, and we know we have to adapt education to meet the needs of the digital economy. So I want to take a look at this. If we go back in history, and we can always enjoy an understanding of today based on how we've gotten there and where we've come from. Well, when education in this country started, it really was about reading, writing, and arithmetic. Three core topics that in the beginning industrial era were critically important. We had to read the manuals, we had to be able to write and communicate with people, and we had to know basic mathematics. Those were core to every curriculum. Now, history was taught, at least in the United States, it was very pro-American, as in most countries, it's pro-your country. But this stuff all was built around a factory model. And it was built that way because that's how countries and nations and city-states thought. We have the factory environment in the economy, and we're going to raise children to function within that factory economy. They go to work in the morning, just like the dad did to the factory. They study through the day, they come home, and then they do after-school activities. They get done around 5, just like, the day of the dad. Now, those were an easier, simpler time, perhaps, but it was modeled after a work ethic and a work pattern that isn't here today. The industrial model of capitalism is gone. It's a thing of the past. So we don't have that structure to today's jobs, but the system of schools haven't yet caught up. They're still rigid. They're still centralized. There's still these things that under the digital economy, we're going to see unwound. So yes, we began with this factory model and the teaching of the 3 R's. Now we have a post-World War II effect, and that's because guys coming back from the field entered into a country that gave them the GI Bill. So for the first time, really, we pushed a bunch of people into college, and that created the 60s revolutions. We have young people who, for the first time in mass, can afford to go to college. Now, at that time, again, college was liberal arts for the most part. It was there to give you a broad education of thinking and critical thinking and logic and allow you to make decisions in complex worlds. We had this movement into what you could call the STEM ideas of science, technology, engineering, and math. But the schools really focused in the 60s still, but they began to migrate. And you can watch this clear as day. From the 60s up through the 80s, they began to work on patterns of social engineering. The schools became a laboratory for what the academic circles thought was healthier social structure. So a lot of what we saw incorporated into the schools is right out of Karl Marx. And I've had arguments with people about this, but if you go study Marx, you'll note a couple of basic things. Marx believed that God had to be thrown out. The opiate of the masses had to be eliminated from society. And it was replaced by the state. So in the United States, for example, where we are granted by God with inalienable rights that the government cannot take from you, well, in the Marxist system, because there's no God, the state grants you the rights that you enjoy. Now, those are two very disparate models and views of philosophy of life, but in our academic circles, the Marxist ideology came out. Furthermore, with the growth of the entitlement society, which was entitlement in money and activity, you had the academics increasingly pressing this idea of the envy economy. Because they have it and you don't, that's a bad thing. They taught you that it's a zero-sum game when it's not. Economies get bigger, markets rise, wealth expands over time. So we have this transition from the basic reading, writing, arithmetic into this cultural engineering. Now, we've gotten back a little bit since 2000 into the STEM curriculum. Again, science, technology, engineering, and math. I think people began to realize this isn't preparing people for the jobs they need to have. The amount of people who go into a job based on what they've learned in college has been declining steadily over years. It's just a devaluation of the degree. But then something happened. COVID. We got shut down by a government that said, we know best. And the academic community signed on to that and said, the state is the power. It knows best with the experts. As a result of that, we put children into remote learning. That had never really been done. But Zoom made it possible. And so we tried as a society to embrace the idea of remote learning. However, it didn't work so well. A lot of people will tell you that that's the first uneducated generation because they sat in classrooms online that had no accountability to the teacher and therefore didn't require participation. Most of the homework was just forgiven because you can't really hold kids accountable to homework if they're not taught it. So the COVID experiment really created a problem that was bubbling. The system itself was outdated. The remote learning just showed it. And so we wake up from that. And I would suggest to you that we have now seen a massive economic disconnect between education and the real world. We're training children in a factory environment as if they're going into the industrial capitalism economy of the past. We're not training them on the digital economy of the future. The jobs we're preparing them for are not the jobs of the future. We are not understanding that this centralized economy and centralized institutional model of education is dead. We are moving into a decentralized model of institutions, a decentralized model of education, and a decentralized economy. Those two things are in conflict. And in terms of preparing children and kids and young people for the jobs of the future, the jobs of the future are things like AI prompt engineers, NFT architects, DAO analysts. Most people in academia don't even know what a DAO analyst would do. We've changed the dynamics of the economy overnight. And we've got to begin changing education to catch up to those dynamics. Again, I was talking at one of the members or the attendees at this speech, and they said, well, Steve, what would you do if you had children today? And I said to them very honestly, I said, today, this is 2025, I would undoubtedly homeschool. And the reason I said that is not for as much as there's a social angle to it, there's an academic angle to it. There are video masterclasses available for just about everything anymore. I would rather have my children taught history by the best history professor in the United States, taught mathematics by the best mathematician in the world, taught physics by the best physics professors. You can aggregate an online curriculum now that is far more powerful than what can be offered in the schools. It's not rigid, it's custom tailored to your child and their growth and their needs and their objectives. Now, social angles you can argue and go back and forth on. That's the individual parental decision, but it's the academic side that's changed. I would want my child prepared for the future, not learning systems and processes of the past. And they asked me about college, and I was telling them this, and I think this is fascinating. When I went to college back in 1980s, early 80s, a summertime job generally couldn't cover all of your tuition, room, and board. It was a little bit short. So you went to private institutions to get loans. Now, those private institutions were at risk of bankruptcy, were at risk of non-payment. So they were pretty reticent to loan overly big amounts of money to students. But they would usually cover the gap between what you could earn and what college cost. That model kept college costs down because there wasn't a lot of money flowing at the system. In the mid 2010-ish timeframe, the government, in its effort to make college better for everybody, eliminated private funding of student loans, made it illegal. They took it over. Well, when the federal government took it over, they started putting more and more money behind it. We'll loan you more, so the institutions raised tuition. We'll loan you more to cover that higher tuition, so the institution raised it more. We'll cover your more loans. And these loans you can't go bankrupt on. These loans you're stuck with. So what we did is we raised a bunch of children under our model, thinking, well, you'll come out with a little bit of debt and you'll be okay, into a world that said you're going to be saddled with massive amounts of debt, into a job that no longer exists. So they said to me, what would you do with a college age student? And I said, well, there's no perfect, uniform solution for everybody. I said, but I think it's not a bad idea to consider online college or community college for certainly the first 2 years. Get the core curriculum kind of out of the way. Use the final 2 years to specialize. But with that, the technology to bring extraordinarily high quality academics to your computer now exists. So if learning is your objective and it's the goal to provide the best academics, I would argue you can get that online better than you can get it from one of these rigid institutions. And that's going to be a critical change that takes place over the next 10 years. More and more people are going to see the wisdom of dialing out of the institution. Again, that's not going to be a statement of the institution. It's simply going to be a transition in the marketplace where the ability to provide a better curriculum and better academic route of study is going to be available online than it is through the institution itself. The institutions of the past are gone. They're centralized control in a factory industrial setup. The world you and I are moving into at light speed is a decentralized, flexible system in which it can be custom tailored to the needs of the participant. Friction is being eliminated everywhere. Well, these institutions are going to fall by the wayside. And I take that to the bank. It may take 5 years, 10 years, but it's going to happen. The value of the credentialing that's being done by these institutions is drying up. It used to be with many companies, you had to have a bachelor's degree to get interviewed. Most companies have dropped that requirement now because knowledge can be gained by watching online videos, by participating in master classes, by all these things that are, there are coursework you can take at Harvard and Wharton School and all these other things with curriculum. Very specific course programs. These are powerful tools. And if you're young and you're saying, I want to become relevant for the future, the way to do it isn't necessarily to go through a typical 4-year degree and learn a bunch of, credit hour courses that you have to have that have no value. Might be better to do a bunch of these correspondent things with Harvard or Princeton or the University of California. Their certificate programs are all over the place, and they can give you the kind of applicable knowledge you need in today's workplace. The world's changed beneath our feet, and education hasn't kept up. I think we head to a world of decentralized education where people choose the curriculum that serves what they want to do going forward. I gave a story in this speech I made. I gave bookended stories, so one at the beginning, one at the end. The story at the beginning was about a young man from a farm in central Illinois who heard a story about a guy named Henry Ford in Detroit and left the only life he had ever known to go off to work in the factories of Detroit. That provided a good living for him and a good way to help his parents keep the family farm. And after years of hard, tedious, really thankless work, he was able to retire. Okay, that model's gone. The other story I gave was a woman who graduated with her MBA from somewhere, and instead of going into the financial capitalism that we've seen in the last 20 years, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, whoever, instead of going into finance, she sat down with her computer in the quiet of her own home and created a virtual company with a designer from, Poland, a tech or a marketing person from Japan, all of this virtual. That's where the world's going. The ability to pull together teams from around the world to serve the needs that you have virtually. The idea of the old factory capital allocations are dead. Go look at Shopify. You have virtually no corporate environment there, but they serve 2 million customers. It's an online business. Look at Uber. They don't really have management. It's management by algorithm. That's the world we're going into and the world we're in. So the whole idea of education structured in the industrial framework is gone. If you're raising children today, you've got to think about what are they going to run into in 5-10 years? We're seeing the tip of the iceberg in the AI world. Most of you, many of you have played around with the large language models like ChatGPT. That is the tip of the iceberg in artificial intelligence. Most of the jobs that we have today are going to be replaced by robotics and AI. Now, that's not a bad thing if you're prepared for it. But the academic institutions of today don't prepare young people for it. That's why they feel so left behind. When you're taught how to run a supply chain through a manufacturing supply house, and the world's already said we've automated that with an AI agent, when you come into that world, you don't know how to compete. So we've taught kids wrong. We've taught them irrelevant things. What we need to be teaching them is critical thinking. We need to teach them creative thinking. We need to understand that the new economy is an idea economy. It's less an operational economy and more an idea economy. The operations and the technologies will handle those things. If you want a website today, you can go to ChatGPT and it'll design you a website. It's the idea for the website it can't come up with. I was watching one of these little videos. There's a guy that puts out Bigfoot videos. You may have seen those. They're really funny. They're super funny when you first see them. They kind of fade over time, but like any of this stuff does. But think about it. That guy thinking about a new idea came up with this creative idea to put Bigfoot on video. He's making probably pretty good money off that right now because it was a new idea. In the idea economy, it's critical thinking, creative thinking, and those skills that matter. Yes, you have to have a basic understanding of mathematics. You certainly need to know how to read. You need to know how to communicate, but that's bigger than writing. It's communicating in all forms. We need to have an understanding of history, lest we keep repeating it, which we have a habit of doing. But we need to start incorporating this decentralized digital framework into our thinking of academics. I don't think the schools can keep up with it. The charter schools, maybe more so, and the private schools more so. But the public school institutions are so big and so rigid, they won't keep up. They will be left behind in the dust. and you can bank on it. It's already happening, and it will happen more and more in the future because we're seeing underemployment and unemployment by graduates now at levels we've never thought we'd see. And it's because they're not studying relevant things. So we need to be teaching financial literacy much more than we do. Young people need to understand how markets work, how capital moves, how ideas get funded, how banking works, how insurance and risk management work. They need to understand these things. When I wrote The Path to Prosperity, my gosh, 10 years ago now, nobody cared about financial literacy. Well, today everybody talks about it, and we have to have it. You have to understand what debt is. What is it really? How does it affect you? What's good debt? What's bad debt? So financial literacy becomes something that we want to put at the core of these kids' education. Coding and AI fluency. You don't have to be a coder in today's world. The computer can do that, but you have to understand logic. You have to understand how these things work, and you have to understand how to communicate with AI. How do you prompt it to give you the response you need? Like anything, AI is a tool that in the hands of an expert is a lot more powerful than the hands of a novice. Well, become an expert in it. Learn how to get out of it the best of what you need, not just random information. Digital ethics and cybersecurity. This is something I was talking about it a lot in my speech yesterday. We're entering a world in which ethics matter. Now, in the United States, specifically, we've come into a postmodern, post-religious kind of culture. We no longer have the guardrails on society that we got from the Judeo-Christian ethic of the past. We've replaced that with government. Again, go back to Karl Marx. He's getting what he wanted. We're now using government as the guardrail. The problem is government looks in the rearview mirror. It can't look forward. So governance of the digital age becomes something that we, the people, have to figure out how we're going to handle. And ethics matter. Creating the technologies of tomorrow with an understanding of good and evil, right and wrong, are very, very important. You have to train these things. We have to train out their biases. We know in current AI technology, when you go into it, they are very biased. There's racial bias, there's gender bias, there's age bias, there's all kinds of biases built into the AI because guess what? We're biased. But we need to learn how to use this technology to debias it, to make it more truly intelligent, and to have ethical guardrails on it so that it is out to serve people, not usurp people. This stuff's happening today. If you're not involved in it, not aware of it, and not dealing with it, I urge you right now, as you're watching this, click open a new tab and go to ChatGPT and open it up. Again, that's a very cursory look at AI. It's a large language model that has a lot of power, but it's nothing compared to what we both have and will have in the next 3 to 5 years because these are being specialized now. But if you go to ChatGPT and start communicating with it, it will learn to talk like you do. It will learn to communicate with you as you communicate with it. And it will be able to get you information much faster than a Google search engine or a DuckDuckGo engine. You can actually have a dialogue with it. I urge you to do that. Become familiar with how this stuff works. Make it your friend. Again, at the speech yesterday, I was talking to a guy who's a truck driver. And he's heard me talk in the past about, I believe we're headed toward a situation where 6 million truck drivers could be out of work. But he also has heard me say that I think those truck drivers need to make themselves aware of AI. Make it your friend. Instead of driving the truck, become a systems engineer in a sense. Become the systems guy who monitors the systems much more like an airplane pilot. They don't really fly the planes anymore. The planes do that, but they monitor the systems to make sure it's all safe. And in a bad situation, they can take over. And that's where truck drivers are going to head if they're on board with it. If you're afraid of it and you run away from it, you'll just be cut out. So make yourself aware of and friendly with this AI stuff. It matters. It matters for your future, and your future is today. I mean, I think if we look again at young people and we want to teach color, creative thinking and logic, and we want to teach other things, I think we need to teach entrepreneurial thinking. I've spoken about this a lot, that we have a future that's going to go one of two directions. And I don't think there's much of a middle ground here. It's going to go more and more like this. Over here on this side is a dysfunctional, fully controlled, government regulated society in which you do what you're told, and 10% of the people own assets, 10% innovate on assets, 10% operate the assets, and everybody else is superfluous. But you're completely monitored by government, you're surveilled constantly, and government has the power. On the other side, in the decentralized technology that we have, extreme freedom can prevail. Where even if you have the 10-10-10 thing, if you're part of the 70%, you can pull yourself out of that by learning entrepreneurial skills. How do you look at market opportunities? How do you measure risk? How do you put in financial forecasting? How do you do marketing and social media? All of these skill sets that the entrepreneurs use can be taught. In addition to that, so if you kind of go down, you say we're going to teach ethics and coding and entrepreneurial skills, media and communication skills have never been more important. Everybody has a voice. Everybody can have a voice that really costs nothing to have. If your voice is good, people, if you're just a entertaining influencer, you're going to have a short-term following. If you have a real message with a real voice, you're going to get people for a long term. Look at Joe Rogan. He's got people for a long time because he's got real information for real people. Teach your young people to understand media from the good and the responsibility to be responsible with it. You can't use media as an anonymous bashing tool. You know, you guys probably saw this on Facebook or TikTok or any one of the Instagram. It's funny the comments I get. The really nasty ones are blocked, so you don't get to see them. But it's funny because they're always anonymous. That's not the way to use this technology. We can't let that become the bullying tool of the future, as it already is, because you can anonymously go in and bash on somebody. Anonymous is a very poor enemy who really cares about them anyway. But my point being, if you teach your young people how to handle media and communication properly, they can truly become an influencer, and tie that to entrepreneurial skills. They can find ways to make money in this decentralized digital economy. So when the system is too slow, as we have now, when bureaucracy and politics make it difficult to adopt new processes, they collapse. And that's what's happening in the institutional educational system today. It's in its last vestiges of survival because it's becoming less and less relevant. Emerging alternatives from online academics, peer-to-peer workshops, all of these certificate programs that are offered, all of those are offering new and better options for people to learn. And school is about learning. So if I can learn it better here in the decentralized world than I can here in the centralized bureaucratic world, I'm going here. There are also learn to earn models, and there's systems that reward education. Technology rewards it. So as some of these companies and some more forward-thinking groups will actually reward you for taking education. For example, I'm in the process of working with a group to build a digital world, a virtual, totally encompassing world. In that world, we're going to have education, guaranteed. But it will be in the form of a masterclass on communications, a masterclass on entrepreneurialism, a masterclass on financial literacy, a masterclass on philosophy. All of these things that people need to learn, we're going to be able to teach right in our world digitally. That will change the way people look at education. I can assure it. So if you're a parent, an educator, a leader of any sort, are you preparing the next generation to understand the decentralized digital economy? Or are you still weighing the industrial economy as your model? I hope it's the former. I hope that you're preparing them for the decentralized economy of the future. Because I heard a quote once: the decentralized economy demands decentralized minds. So we have to get out of the fixed rote memory world into the intellectually pure world. Critical thinking skills, logic thinking skills, creative thinking skills, these real things that say I can participate in the digital economy, not looking back to the industrial economy. So as we continue on the Steve Beeman Show, we've got more on education and flow. We got all this stuff because in our world and our worldview, your world has changed. Tomorrow doesn't look like yesterday. So the question is, will you be part of the standing by generation, just watching it and be kind of less and less relevant? Or are you going to be the driver who learns it, understands it, and manages it so that you set the rules? Well, I hope you'll do that. I hope you'll be part of a movement to put good rules into the AI world and not let the nefarious types get a hold of it. So we'll continue the discussion on the next episode. I thank you always for your time. Be strong, be safe, and be sovereign.